Hello and welcome to Hudson Valley News and Views. I'm County Legislator Borgia, and I'm very delighted to have as my guest this time Rehabilitation Through the Arts. Catherine Volkner, who is the Executive Director, correct?
And the founder, yep.
And Nate, whose real name I have temporarily forgotten.
Cornell Austin.
Cornell Austin, affectionately known as Nate, who is here to talk to us about his participation in the program. So let's get started. When we were just talking before we started filming, we were talking a little bit about Sing Sing itself as an institution. As a resident of Ossining and the former town supervisor of Ossining, I do have a little bit of knowledge of the history of Sing Sing. And the interesting thing about Sing Sing is that it really mirrors the history of the American penal system. So sometimes it's been very innovative and sometimes it's been very horrible. Yeah. So it's interesting that this program actually started at Sing Sing, something that is innovative and something that really brings, as you say, some element of humanity back to the experience. So let's talk a little bit about Rehabilitation Through the Arts. Why don't you give us a little bit of an overview?
Okay, we did start in 1996 at Sing Sing. It was an idea that basically came out of some men on the inside who had this dream to write a play, and they wanted someone to help put it on.
Right.
And through a connection that came to me, and we wrote a proposal for corrections, and it was approved, and we started the program in the fall of 1996, and 1 year later produced our first play, an original story called Poetry in Motion, which dealt with Reality in Motion.
Reality in Motion.
Thank you. Which was really much about what the lives of many of the people on the inside had lived with. It was about their neighborhoods, about drugs, about violence, about HIV/AIDS. It was about, but it was also about redemption, and it was about the human spirit. And that's what started it. That became the cornerstone of our program, and very quickly, within a year or two, the men themselves changed the name to Rehabilitation Through the Arts from the theater workshop, and that was the beginning. There's more to the story, Catherine, but
of course,
that's the beginning.
Of course. Tell us about your beginnings with Rehabilitation Through the Arts.
Oh, I started with Rehabilitation Through the Arts in 1997. A good friend of mine, David Wayne Britton, at the time I was in Sing Sing, and I was trying to get a program off the ground that dealt with domestic violence. So I was just focused on that. And he was telling me about this wonderful lady, Catherine Volkner, who came in and they were doing this theater thing. And I was like, no, well, I'm doing something. So I told him, I said, well, if you really need me, then, let me know and I'll be there for you. So sometime later he came, he said, Nate, I really need you, man.
I know that was a wide opening.
I said, wow, okay. And I said, okay. And I started rehearsals with them because one of the guys, we were doing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Right. Yes.
And one of the guys had left on the transfer. So I filled his space. And I just automatically, I fell in love with the process, and I fell in love with the guys, the people, and the sincerity, and the things that were born out of that. How it made me look into myself and see certain things, and it just opened my eyes to a world. I mean, coming from Dylan and Sing Sing that I had not explored, I hadn't known existed. And I said, wow, I like this.
Just dig a little bit deeper into that, if you don't mind, for me. Was it the acting process? Was it the bonding process?
It was the bonding process, and as far as what it allowed me to do was put myself in another person's shoes. It allowed me to become empathetic.
Yeah,
so for the most part, I was firstly exposed to empathy. I was like, wow, okay, because now I have to put myself in this person's shoes, and I have to go through what it was that they were going through. And then I had to look at what was inside of me that would allow me to do certain things and how I felt about certain things. So that opened up a whole new world to me at that time too. So it was like, wow. And it also mainly, I think, it exposed me to the reality of community, because we were a community, and you had responsibility, and you had to cooperate. There was things that had to go on within that process in order for this to take place. And for the first time, I was basically exposed to this.
Right. And do you think that
your realistic level?
Yeah. And do you think your experience was common? Is that how most of the people who participated felt? This was
after a while, yes. Some people, you get some people and they come in purely for the acting. They say, "Oh, I've always wanted to act." but then the process it bites them, it comes up and it bites them, you know. And that's what they become exposed to, and that's what happens is they're now accountable. You're now responsible, and for some people, for the first time in our lives, you know, we are actually held accountable, you know, for something. We are now responsible for something, and we learn that, okay, you know what, this isn't so bad. You know, we're exposed to authority on a positive level. You know, we can look at it now in a different light because you have your peers as peers, you know, teaching each other. So I might be the assistant director. So now there's a certain authority that comes with that. And your peers have to recognize that authority. But in order to do so, they have to understand that, you know, you're a person of authority yourself. You know, if you have little brothers and sisters, then you're a person of authority in their lives. You know what I mean?
No,
and so it's like, oh, wait a minute. Wow. You know what? That's right. Hey, so now you can look at the officers and, you know, the administration in a different light. You can look at authority and authority figures in like a different light.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And the responsibility, of course, that you have to one another, because regardless of what your part is, even if you're not in a position of authority in the ensemble, people are still relying on you.
Exactly. I mean, if I'm the prop man, and this my job just to make sure the prop is there. And at first, it might seem mundane to me, you know, etc. But if the scene calls for a telephone, and the sound man, if the telephone rings at a certain time, and that telephone is not on the table,
it breaks the spell.
This is improv at its best. You know?
Exactly.
I think maybe that's part of the real difference between what we do and sort of theater, because we use theater as a vehicle to build life skills, and one of that is the responsibility of being part of a team in a community, and that team means that the actors who get most of the accolades, they're no better than the prop person, because without everyone working together, it does, and that's what we emphasize again and again, is that yes, the actors may be up front, but backstage is just important. So it is really part of a process of recognizing that through all of us, we can be better than as a one alone.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that you say that, because my younger daughter just finished her first year of high school, and she worked on the lights on the school plays in our school, in the Hudson High School, which has a very good theater program. And she went through that process too, where first she was interested in the technical aspects of it. She had taken a film class the summer before, and so she was interested in lights, you know, and how you do lights. But then after a while, she came to realize, oh, if I'm working this spot and it's not on the person when they're doing their solo, exactly.
It's just as important as me saying my lines and me being out there. You know, that light is just as important.
But it was exactly that same process. It was exactly that same process of really realizing what it means to be part of the team, realizing that you do have the responsibility that goes beyond your own personal interests, and also realizing, because being a lights person, nobody even sees you, you know,
or a props person,
or a props person, right? Sometimes you walk across the stage in black outfits to pull a sofa off or something like that. But yeah, you're not really in the forefront, but you're all part of what makes the magic.
And that's community.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same way whether you're doing it in a Sing auditorium or you're doing it out here in the community. You have a responsibility to your neighbor. You have a responsibility to the grocery guy on the corner. You know, you have a responsibility to your community. And it is, for me, it was that exposure through the arts that first led me to start to see what my responsibility, what community meant, and what my responsibility was to that community.
So let me ask a question. What do you think about, does this have impact beyond the actual participants in the program, the people who, you know, the other people in the prison who get to see the performance? Is there...
I think our impact, after years of working at it, Catherine, yes, we directly today serve 150 men and women in 5 different facilities. Okay, so that's a direct delivery service. On the other hand, our performances, whether they're in dance or in vocal training and singing or in music or in theater or in art, visual art, affect then the broader community,
Right.
who see the work that's being done, and in some cases, anecdotally, like from One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest, when Dino, who played
Chief.
one of the chief, the
Yeah,
lead role,
yeah.
and he was out in the yard after the performance was over, and Dino is a big man and not an easy person to be afraid that, you know, he would be fearful. But he said some of the thugs in the yard came to talk to him, and he said, I sort of, you know, wasn't sure what they were talking about.
Right.
And then they said, you know, man, I was watching you during the play, and when you were talking about hearing the Canadian geese in your own homeland, we could hear them too. And so it was like indirectly, but even more interestingly, we did a play called Jitney, which is an August Wilson piece.
I love that.
And it's so do I. And we've done it in every facility except the women's facility now. And in that play, a man plays, Mr. Becker plays the head of the Jitney station, and his son comes home who has been in prison for 20 years. And there's a scene, a confrontation between the father and the son about his life, the father's life being changed, not just the son's life being changed, but the father's life being impacted. And someone who played that role also heard from someone who'd been in the audience and said, I never looked at it from my father's perspective, nor my mother's.
Right.
I only thought about what I had done and the person, the victim, and now I realize what my family suffered through also. And so we indirectly reach the audiences in different ways. We also then have the permission through DOCS, the Department of Corrections, to bring in outside guests.
Right.
At Sing Sing, we've now built that number up to 285 once a year, which is quite amazing,
It is
in this
amazing.
country. And then we bring them into all the other facilities in much smaller levels. But that way we reach community and show them that the humanity behind the walls deserves at least a second chance. For the ones who are trying to change, who have chosen to change, they need a second chance. And the only way, because our media and television and newsprint all talks about how horrific it is, and there are. People should be in jail who've done the crime, but they need a second chance. And so by bringing people in to see what goes on is one of the way we expand it. So yes, we're reaching a lot of levels.
Yeah. Well, just because I know that for me, just in my life, you know, I'm a consumer of a lot of arts, and I especially love the theater and opera and so many things. And I find that it is so, that whole transcendence of the arts, that it brings you to a different, deeper emotional level. Just the participation beyond all of the other pro-social things that you were talking about before, the bigger picture things. But just actually the emotional experience of engaging in a live theater performance, even as an audience member, I do find is transformative. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, people get so interested in arts, because of the emotional connection, not only from an creator point of view when you're creating the art, but from a spectator or I don't know, what else would you be, a audience member or you're a participant, right? And that is some of the magic of live theater, right? You do interact with the audience, absolutely. And in fact, the two performances that I did see in Sing Sing, I think that was, the first one was the first time I was in Sing Sing, with the first play. I've been in Sing Sing many times since then for various reasons, but and so that was a very profound experience, a visceral experience.
Physically coming into a
maximum, the way it smells, the way it looks, there's the sounds, you know. And it's interesting because I do live in Ossining, and you know, we're a hilly community, and sometimes you do hear the noises from Sing Sing from a lot of different places in the community. Sometimes you can even hear it at Park School, you know, which is almost like half a mile up from Sing Sing, but because of the hollows and the I guess reflection off the river or something, there's you hear Sing Sing, but it still sounds so distant and mysterious. And Ossining as a community is tied to Sing Sing, of course, but we don't have any time to interact usually, except for situations like this. So you know, that was very, very, very profound for me. But I also think that the audience members sort of experiencing exactly what you're saying, sort of experiencing that sense of maybe they had never thought about empathizing what it means to be an inmate in a maximum security prison, and maybe they were thinking about that, you know, it was really clear to see the humanity of the actors, you know, that's what we saw, but you know, it's a transformative experience on the other side too. Listen, I agree with you that when people do terrible crimes, they should be punished. I'm not disagreeing with that, but they're not so different. The people who commit the terrible crimes are not so different in terms of like the human form than anyone else, right? I mean, we all sort of have the same sort of things that we struggle with. So that connection, I think, is really a significant part of the program as well.
I mean, you make choices in life.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of us have made. My life is an open book. You know, today. I live my life above board today.
Yeah,
I didn't always do that.
Right.
But I'm so proud.
Yeah.
You know, of where I'm at now.
Absolutely.
You know, of my humanity.
Yeah.
And how I feel to where as though I live my life on the table.
Right.
So we make, you know, certain decisions, and these decisions have repercussions, and that's the thing. Actions and consequences. You know, when you're young and you're going through these things, you don't look at the consequences. You're not thinking about the consequences. There should be no consequences. But what if there wasn't no consequences? You know, are we trying to get back to the Wild Wild West days? Of course not. You know, and you look at these things now, and you say, well, you know what? My actions had a consequence, and this was the consequence. But then it goes to, how far is my consequence going to go? When does my consequence stop? When now does I get that second chance?
Right.
When is my punishment over? If I may, just briefly.
Sure.
When I was a very young boy, we used to jump. We would go on the roof, and we would jump from roof to roof, from building to building, which was very dangerous.
I'm so happy I didn't see that.
Well, one day my mother did.
Oh, my goodness.
I told my mother that we were up there jumping roofs. So I went to jump, and just as I made this jump, I heard this blood-curdling scream, you know, scream my name, Connie! And I barely made it to the other roof, where I was hanging on. And when I pulled myself up on the roof, I turned around, and there was my mother. And my mother was looking, and she was shaking.
Yeah.
She was just gone, you know, and it was like this look in her eyes was fire. I said, I'm never going home again. You know what I mean? Because I know what's going to happen. My mother gave me a whooping every time she thought of it. She'd be talking on the phone. She said, you know, this boy, and this is like a month later. You know, this boy, yeah, and he just that and the other, and I'd be walking past, and he was jumping, and he went on the daggone roof, and until one day my aunt says, Vivian, you know, when are you going to stop punishing the boy for that? Because you're not punishing no more for what he's did. You're punishing him now for how he made you feel.
Right.
You know, when is it going to be? When are you going to stop? When is it going to be enough?
Yeah.
And I guess it kind of snapped her out of it.
Right.
So
Thank goodness for you. Except I sympathize with her very much.
Oh, absolutely. I can see it today, and that's what I mean. Today I can too. You know, I can see how, like I said, the effects. There's no such thing as a victimless crime.
Right.
I don't care if you steal a candy bar from the store.
Yeah.
There was a victim. The store owner, maybe now he can't lend credit to somebody because of the money that he just had to come in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And the arts is just one of the many things that can help you realize this, that can help you come to this type of realization.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think what you're describing too is that there are consequences of good behavior as well. So coming into working on a domestic violence program, making that decision that you're going to work on a program, and then saying, okay, even just that offer, I will be there if you need me. Like, those were good decisions that also had very good positive consequences that gave you more even than you were anticipating.
Opportunities to make better decisions and to learn and see, and that's what happens.
And to impact people positively, you know. And that's a very profound thing.
It is.
Yeah. And that's one of the greatest things, I think, for me, that's came out of my participation and my relationship with rehabilitation through the arts, is my burning need to give back. And to continue on this work and take it even further, you know, because I see that it does work. I've seen the impact. I'm a living example of the impact. I've seen it work on so-called thugs and gangsters that would rather be in the yard, and then they're exposed to something like the dance program, and the next thing you know, they want to, well, how do I get with that? What's that about? You know? And they no longer want, because they want something different. It's just that a lot of times they don't have the opportunity. There's not a lot of opportunities for them to do something different, you know, that they can be comfortable with. They want something different. They just don't know how to go about getting it until you have something that comes along and say, okay, here's a light, Here's the speaking right here.
Yeah.
And no, look at this, and you can follow this,
Yeah.
and here's a structure that you can use,
Right.
you know, to get that difference. And then you look and you say, wait a minute, these are my peers participating in this, you know, and it's not. It's still manly. I can still hold on to my masculinity.
Right.
You know, I can still be who I am, but now I can be more than who I thought I was. I can truly be who I am because I can come in this room and I can take the mask off.
You're telling your defenses.
You know,
Yeah.
right? I can
Yeah.
put that down, and I can be the silly guy that I want. I love being a 12-year-old
Yeah.
again. What is so crazy? Anytime it calls for
Yeah.
oh, Nate, we're doing this, then let's go. Zap, 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 you know?
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. I just read on Facebook, of all things, the woman who played Catwoman in the Batman series, the on TV, Adam West, that Batman series.
Eartha Kitt at that time.
Oh,
I know
man,
Eartha
was it
Kitt did it.
Catwoman then? Oh, I guess she was
Batgirl.
Batgirl. Julie Newmar.
Julie
Newmar. That's the kind of thing Tom knows. Yeah.
Okay, Tom.
Anyway, she she turned 80 just recently, and she was talking about what that means to be 80, and she was talking about how she doesn't have all the anxieties that she had when she was in her middle ages, and that she is more childlike now than she was, ever before in her life. And it was exactly that. She'd given herself permission, exactly what you say, to re-experience that joy, and she was fully integrated with that because she was allowing that to happen. So, so it's very interesting.
And it's not just about being silly,
Oh,
as
yeah,
a child.
sure. It's
because
about-
when you look at a young child, I
Yeah.
mean, their minds are so open.
Yeah.
Their eyes are so open. Their curiosity is so open. Their
Yeah.
innocence is so open.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is that
Right.
we,
Right.
when we revert
You,
back to
yeah,
that,
you
that
can
we
you
look
can
for.
you can find that again in yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think in prison where you really, well, in community we wear masks anyway. We wear masks in the corporate structure, in the nonprofit structure, in academia.
in politics.
In politics, I didn't want to go there. But in prison, the mask is very important,
Right.
because it can keep you safe.
Right.
So this is who I am. I'm not going anyplace else but this,
Right.
because I feel safe that way.
Right.
Whatever that identity is, and Nate could speak to that more than I. But what happens inside the walls, our walls, which we call the container of RTA, is after someone understands it's safe, and they can take off the mask, and whether they're just being silly or they're saying something about their childhood or their family or what has been meaningful to them, they know that that's going to stay in the circle. Then that's it. That produces trust, and trust is something that lots of people in prison don't have with each other, with outside visitors,
Right.
people who come in. So after a period of time, building the trust, saying things that make you vulnerable, which you wouldn't do in prison either, but you can't get back in touch with your humanity or begin to feel empathy unless you are open to being vulnerable. And as
Right.
Nate referred to the dance program, he was one of the lead dancers. And it's really in prison to say that you're going to dance means an automatic reference to what
Right.
you can imagine.
Right.
And our men actually, the first time they performed for their peers, many of the men who came down spoke later from the audience that they expected to laugh, they expected to boo, and instead they gave them a standing ovation because they recognized how much hard work went into warming up, dancing as an ensemble.
Right.
It's not about an individuality.
Yeah.
So they got a lot of accolades for being who they were. And
Right.
I think the
and
men
that emotional connection that happens when you witness a performance. Absolutely.
and because
Yeah.
dancing puts you in touch in a very different
Right,
way than
right.
theater does.
Absolutely.
You really, and you have to be in the moment, and you have to be completely focused
Yeah.
where you are, and that's a whole separate
Yeah.
part of the dance program too.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about some of the the menu of programs that RTA has.
We were no longer considered a theater program. We were in the very beginning, and that, of course, provides all kinds of opportunities within theater to do community.
Right.
But we then branched out, and we now do almost all of the creative arts. Dance, modern dance in particular, movement. We've done some yoga with the women in Bedford Hills, but it's not a staple of what we do. Creative writing, poetry, vocal training, music, visual art, and we've actually studied great literature like Dante's Inferno and Shakespeare, and either used it as creative writing or performed it,
Right, I
or
did see one
written
of the Shakespeare.
parallel scenes
Yeah.
using the Shakespeare theme but writing it in contemporary language.
Right.
So that explores literature on a different level. So I would say at this point, we're more or less providing most of the creative arts, which gives everyone a different chance to participate in something.
And which, tell us about the facilities that you're in.
We're in 3 maximum security facilities. It's Sing Sing, Greenhaven, that's in Putnam County, actually Dutchess County.
Dutchess, yeah.
And Bedford Hills in Westchester County. And then 2 medium security. Fishkill, that's in Beacon, New York.
Okay.
And Woodburn, which is way up in the Catskills near South Fallsburg.
Oh, yeah.
So that's another medium.
Yeah.
So directly we serve about 150 people.
Right. No, that's great. That's really wonderful. So tell me a little bit about the structure of your program. If someone is interested in helping or becoming I don't know, what are some of the opportunities that...
Well, there's 2 ways to look at entering the RTA program, and I'll let Nate speak to, if you're on the inside and you want to enter the program, that's one way. If you're on the outside and want to enter the program, we're very, very fortunate. Most of the facilitators, almost every facilitator that we have, and we have about 25 working in 5 different facilities, are really very, very professional in their field. Educators with PhDs or masters in fine arts or in dance and music. And also we have a collaboration with NYU's Graduate School in Educational Theater. So we have a faculty, we call it, of people who really come from the best of this world in the arts and education. And they will hear about us because we do have public relations that works for us. It's word of mouth to a great degree, Kathy. People who are happy on the inside working and realize what it means to work behind the walls, talk to their friends about it. People call us, they write to us and they say, we're interested in, it's one thing to say I'm interested in teaching or leading a workshop behind bars. It's another to say I'm interested in going back because I sort of want to help them, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, we don't go in to, quote, help them. We go in and share what we have. They share what they have. And that dynamic creates what makes RTA what it is today, 17 years later. So we're very careful about people. They go through an extensive screening program with RTA, not just a resume, but sit down and talk about what it means to work inside. What does it mean as a woman to work inside? What does it mean as a man to work inside? We don't have a hard, fast rule about age, but undergraduates in college, our RTA doesn't permit. Graduate programs, yes, because we have some people who come out of graduate programs, and then it's an orientation, and then it's an orientation through Department of Corrections. All of our workshops have syllabus, so you have to write what the objectives are, and the objectives are not to produce a better actor, but to train people in life skills that can come out of theater. So that's the process to come into RTA for facilitators.
Is that volunteer?
Oh, yeah. I use the word facilitator because they do volunteer their time, but they are directly teaching and delivering a service that is, in fact, we use it in our budget, that it's called in-kind services, and it is part of our budget because the services that we would have to pay for are literally almost $200,000 a year in services because these are people with MFAs, PhDs, delivering college-level programs to our people. And we now have 2 evidence-based research programs that proves that we're making an impact. And that's been done through, actually here in Westchester County, Purchase College, SUNY, has been involved, John Jay in New York with the Department of Corrections. So that's part of getting into RTA.
And what about supporting you financially? I know that you have a fundraiser.
We have a fundraiser. We have a kind of a mixed way of approaching that. We have individuals, private foundations. We have some corporate. I'm very pleased that Eileen Fisher is one of the supporters for the women's program.
Not surprising.
It's really quite wonderful what they've done. We have church groups who involved it. We actually have the Hudson River Presbytery, which is a large presbytery for this area. We have the Metro Presbytery in New York City who does. And then the Department of Corrections actually has funded RTA's pure out-of-pocket expenses for us to travel to locations, scripts, books, any of the out-of-pocket expenses has been covered to some degree by the Department of Corrections, and so we consider them to be an ally within our budget. So.
No, I think that's wonderful. I think, your philosophy is so, in my opinion, so spot on in terms of the exchange. I mean, when you were speaking, I was actually thinking about writings that John Cheever wrote about his experience teaching writing in Sing Sing, when he lived in Austin prior to his death from alcoholism. But the reason why is that it was clear from things that he wrote about that experience of teaching a college-level course in writing, that how much he benefited and what he learned, and a beautiful piece of fiction came out of that experience. And so that it just goes back to what you say about the creative process being such a collaborative process. And I also like that idea of it's not to help, it's to share and to connect and to connect with each other.
Which is so important for the guys inside, because you know, we get the disconnect from the community. And it plays on your psyche. Yeah. You know, I mean, you start to thinking that you're alone, they don't care. You know, you can become bitter and angry, you know, because you're not now looking at you're focusing on what's being done to you. Right. You know, your humanity is being taken away from you, and it's not getting given back. You know, and then the misconceptions that you have about other people are staying there. You know, they're not being challenged. You know, and then when you get these volunteers come in, and of course maybe at first there's a caution. You know, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? You know, why are these people?
Why are they here? What's their agenda?
Yes. You know, what's in it for them? But then after a while, you learn about win-win. Right. You know, not just I have to win and you lose. But you know, everybody can and should win. And that there is a collaboration, and they're bringing that there's a certain humanity that comes inside that kind of gives it back to you. You know, for me, on a personal level, it was coming out of that experience that I had coming. I had never been exposed to raw racial hatred until I went up to Dannemora, where I was, you know, Ku Klux Klan. I mean, I was exposed to it on a large scale. So what that did was instilled some type of bitterness inside of me. And maybe, you know, help grow the seed of my own little prejudice or whatever that might have been in there. But then when these people come in, you know, and I'm saying years later, and my distrust starts to dissolve because they're not asking me for anything except my time. You know, they're not giving me any harshness. You know, they're actually identifying with some of the things that I'm feeling, that I've gone through, etc. They actually want to hear what I have to say. And I'm like, wait a minute, you actually want to hear what I have to say? That's just unheard of. You know, what do you really? You're really interested? Okay, and then you sit down and can start opening up. You know, you can start talking about yourself on a personal level. There's that trust now. That trust starts to come into play. And then you learn that everyone's not against me. You know, everything isn't just black and white. You know, and you can start now to begin to see your own role and your situation and in things, and still learn that, well, these people still believe in me. Somebody does still believe in me, because, and that's hope. If you don't have hope, then what's the use? You know, what am I doing any of this for? My hope is gone.
That's true. I think that's true. And on the outside of the prison walls too.
We don't have hope. How do you get up every day?
And now can you imagine what the prison guards' lives would be like if there was just a prison full of inmates that had lost hope? You know, if these, because, and when you talk about, you know, the effects that it have, not just for the participants in RTA, there's an effect with the prison guards as well, because now they don't have to worry about me in the yard with a knife. They don't have to worry about me, you know, doing certain things. They would rather have me in a classroom, you know, talking about Shakespeare and things like that there, than making their job harder. You know, so now they can breathe a little bit. So it affects the community on a whole. The whole prison community is affected. You know, the guy that wants to come to the performance, you know, and he wants to, the CO said something to him that, you know, he don't particularly like, and he wants to curse the CO out or whatever the case may be, but he holds his tongue because he would like to go to the performance on Thursday. That's you know what I mean? So now there's that effect too, you know, so it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would assume that being a prison guard is actually quite a hard job, and you have a mask that you have to put on for that role as well.
Exactly. Because there's a distrust that they have to have too. Why is this inmate approaching me like this? Why is he? I mean, you have those who would rather, they're not, I mean, their mentality is the John Wayne mentality. Lock them up, throw away the key, don't give them anything, etc., etc. But that doesn't work. You know? But for the vast majority of them, they would rather be able to kind of like kick back and breathe, you know, and not have to worry about, you know, a dangerous. I mean, they would like some type of conversion. They would like that rehabilitation because, you know, the bottom line is at some point in time, for the vast majority, what did you say, 97%?
97% come back.
Are coming back to the community.
Yeah, so. No. I mean, I've had this conversation with some of my more conservatively minded friends about why you should have resources like programs like this or like education in prisons, because there's adult people cooped up for years. They're going to learn something. You know, what do you want them to learn?
Want them to learn how to be a better criminal?
Well, or to learn how to become hard, or to let that seed.
Exactly.
You know, it's also. I mean, aside from the humanity part of it, there's the pure dollars and cents.
Oh yeah,
you know, with more than 50% of the people returning to prison within the first 3 years across our country. Less here in New York State. It's only about 42%. It's costing us close to $60,000 a year for each of the 56,000 people in prison in New York State. We could spend more on education if we weren't running those prisons. People going back and again, what does that mean longer term? Is it just means that we're housing human beings. If they did the crime, they need to do the time. I'm for that. But we've got to give them the keys to come back and stay out. And become tax-paying, law-abiding, real citizens where they want to be.
And not only, I mean, there is the hard dollars and cents costs associated with it, but I think there's also the human potential loss associated with the way that our, you know, the recidivism that we have in our prisons.
And there's pure public safety. If you're to get down to really the fear issues, let's bring out better people so that they don't really get you in trouble again, your community in trouble, or your kids are going to school or something. Let's be sure that they're changed.
And, you know, to what you said about the prison guards too, I would guess that if someone were to see or have a relationship with an inmate, and that inmate grew and turned into someone who could re-enter the world as a productive citizen, that's got to feel pretty good from the guard point of view as well.
I mean, isn't that, I mean, when you look at it, right, because, and I'm glad this subject came up, because I've been thinking about it for the longest of time. We say, there's a saying that says it takes a village to raise a child, right? So that means all of us. Why are these different departments and municipals in place? Why are they there? I mean, you know, you have the Department of Corrections. So then that means you should be doing something to help correct. If you are a correction officer and not just a prison guard, then you should have some aspect of helping to correct. That means interacting, if my mind is at a different state, and helping me to realize that, well, listen, Austin, you know, this is like this because of this. You know, yes, I'm an authority figure, but so are you. You have brothers and sisters, you know, and helping a person to, I mean, it's not just about lock them up, throw away the key, unless you're actually training worse people. So we all have a stake in this, because we're all coming home. And one of the things that I'm seeing since I've been home, I've done 33 years. I came home last year, and Catherine and I had a conversation earlier about the difference between when I went in and things that I see today, and that there's a disconnect with people. You know, on one hand, we're into our devices. Rather than talk to you, I'd rather be, you know, doing this, that, and the other. There's no human, you know, I see something going on with you, and I put my headphones on and get into my texting or whatever the case is. On the other hand, you know, there is a sense of, okay, I'm still in everybody's business to a degree because of what 9/11.
Sure, Homeland Security. We're all worried about, you know, everything.
So, you know, there's cameras everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. But we fail to see our greatest resources. It's not in devices. It's in each other. Humans, we are our greatest resources. And there is a great resource at the community's disposal that they do not use, and that is formerly incarcerated people.
That's right.
Especially when you're talking about getting the youth together. You know, there's this blitz on getting the guns off the streets, gang violence, stopping the shooting. I see it everywhere, all over. And these young people that's doing this, they look up to, unfortunately, people who have been to prison. They're
Right,
not afraid of prison.
Right,
And they're not afraid of prison because they really, really haven't been through it, and because what they're being told is being romanticized.
Right.
Prison is being romanticized. When a person like me come out and I tell you the horrors of prison, and they look, oh wow, you did, yo OG, you just came out of jail, you was in Attica, you didn't sing. Yeah man, I was. Yo, my uncle was in jail and this, that, and the other. Yeah, well, tell your uncle to tell you what's really happening.
Right.
So when I tell them the horror stories, I'm telling them from personal experience, and they're listening because they can relate. They know that they can sense when you're telling them the truth,
Right.
or when you're coming from the heart, or from what you know, as opposed to what you think.
Right.
You know.
Right.
You know. And so when you're telling them, now they get a deeper sense of it. And I'm not saying anything to you that you can't check out.
Right.
You know, I tell them, check it out, and I
Right.
speak in their language. So that's how, you know, we start to make an effect.
Right.
Use me.
Right. Right.
I'm supposed to come back to the community
Yeah.
and contribute and give back.
Yeah.
You have some youngsters that need to tell them about your experience.
Yeah.
You was just there. You can't tell me what hell is like unless
Yeah.
you was there. I
Yeah.
mean, you can say it from a perspective of coming from the books,
Right.
but you can't tell me from a perspective of experience.
Right.
From that perspective. And it's a difference of me hearing you.
Right.
I can hear it. Okay, well, you know what? She's coming from experience. That resonates within me a little bit.
I think he's a little. This is a segue into something that we wanted to talk about anyway,
Okay,
which is that our RTA has been behind the walls for 17 years,
Right.
and now what we're doing for the first time is launching a youth program
Excellent.
in which formerly incarcerated alumni from RTA who want to give back can tell the story to those youth in their own communities who are on that pathway to prison,
Right.
which is such a natural thing, unfortunately, for urban youth today.
Right. Right.
And Nate we're into a pilot program, which will probably be in Queens, and Nate will be the coordinator in charge. And
Right.
the point being is that formerly incarcerated can be the best resources
Right.
back in the communities to stop this
Right.
revolving door of people going in and coming out,
Yeah.
the young people, but also going into prison for the first time.
Right.
So RTA is proud to be launching that this year.
That's excellent. That's
Yeah,
really
we're
excellent.
excited.
I was going to ask you how you are giving back. So I'm glad to hear that. That's a really perfect way to use what all of the things that you've been through in order to connect with people. I think you're so right about human resources being our best asset. Really, in terms of any problem that we have as a society, that really is our only way. I think President Kennedy said, any human problem can be solved by human minds or by human beings, and that's really true. Minds and hearts, I guess. That's what you're talking about. Actually, the whole, the totality of a person. But I think that you're right about the disconnect in terms of electronics, but I think people really, really, really crave human connections. And that you can, I'll just use my own life in politics, you know, sometimes we'll have things that we'll see from different ideological points of view, and it's a clash, you know, and we each feel very strongly that our position is the correct one, and so there's a little bit of a back and forth on that. But I have never, ever met a person, even if there was, I don't dislike too many people, but there's like maybe three. But, so let's just take one of those three. But there's always some way that you can connect, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's always some way that you can connect. So the opportunity for you to connect with young people who are maybe on a bad path or who are already in the system and maybe are likely to be have recidivism, that's so, it's so what people need right now. You know, and that's the way I think we solve all of our intractable problems.
And the arts
honestly.
is good, and the arts is a great way to do that.
I mean, from the beginning of human experience, right?
Right, exactly. That's one of the ways of communicating.
Yeah.
There's probably the most simplistic line, but a really wonderful line comes from a man in Sing Sing right now who's been doing a lot of years and won't see even his first board for another 7. Wonderful musician, lyricist. He said the arts make you think differently so that you act differently, so that you get different results.
Yeah.
And he said, isn't that the definition
Right.
of rehabilitation? You act differently, you think differently, and you get different results.
Yeah.
And although you can't explain how the arts actually work, and Nate earlier referred to the process isn't just a production or a dance. It's all that we go through to
Right.
get to it.
Right, right.
All of
That's
that
the process.
interaction between human beings, the need of each other to be together, and then solving problems
Tell me
together.
a little. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that that's exactly right, and I think that art has always served as that function, frankly. You know, in society for humans and as an outlet and that emotional component. And our humans are driven. Really, every human is driven to create. You know,
Yes, in some way,
wherever
in
your
some way.
gifts lay, right? But every human is driven to create. So it's very wonderful to use that as sort of the. I was thinking of when you were talking about people in the yard and their reactions to various performers. I was thinking, yeah, you know, you just have to give people like a small little lifeline, like a little break in their way, to allow them to make a different choice, to go a different direction, to give them the cover that they need in order to make that choice.
Give them permission.
Yeah, give them permission. That's exactly right, and that's how you exert your personal authority, even within the confines of a situation that. You know, where a lot of your autonomy is, or where all of your autonomy has been stripped.
Has been taken away.
Yeah.
I mean, because I have an obligation. You know, I took a lot from the community. I have an obligation to give something back. I could never repay for what I've taken, but I can try. I can give what I can.
Right.
You know, and a good way to do that is from where I stand. Is with the youth, and I've just been blessed. You know, God has blessed me with a gift to be able to, you know, have some type of influence, to be able to speak to the youth, to have some type of influence with them.
Right.
You know, from when I was inside to outside. You know, I was telling Catherine today about an incident when I was on the bus a few weeks ago, and there was this young man, and to show you how the gulf between the youth and the elders have been widening so much, and how afraid a lot of people are of our youth. There was you know, a young group of young men and women who I guess they just came from school, and they was on the bus, and they kind of congregate towards the back of the bus. You would think after years of what we went through to try to get to the front of the bus.
Yeah, the back of the bus is for youth always.
So, but you know, be it what it is.
You have to always race to get those back seats. I remember that well from my own childhood.
Yeah, but as Nate's saying, considering the black issues.
No, I
know
I understand what he's saying, but there's always a lot of cultural components.
So so I'm back there, and a lot of the elders stay away from that.
Right.
You know, but I go to the back of the bus because I'm not afraid of them. I sit there, and there's this one young man between the age of 16, I guess he's about 16 and 17, and he's sitting on the back of the seat with his feet actually in the chair. And I had never seen this before on a bus, public transportation. I'm like, wow. So I'm looking at him, and then his friends, and they're listening to, you know, the music, and one guy had a book bag in the seat, and the lady wanted to sit down, and he caught an attitude because he had to move his book bag out of the seat. So I'm looking at him. So I look all of them in the eye, you know, let them know, one, I'm not a threat, two, I'm not afraid of you. You know, so I'm looking at the guy that's sitting there, and his friend said, yo, man, you should sit down. So he started talking about when he was a youngin'.
He was 16.
You know, yeah.
He's a youngin',
you know, when he was a youngin', and how he used to wild out on the bus, etc., etc. So after running through this in my mind and checking out, you know, what my approach is going to be, etc., I got up, and a lot of times you have to speak in their language.
Right,
you know, I
sure.
don't have to be like you, or whatever, but I use certain phrases that you will understand, that I'm not a threat to you, for one, and that I understand you. So I went to him, I said, yo, champion, not for nothing, you know, I mean, you do what you want to do, you know, I ain't trying to tell you how to do your thing or anything like that there. I said, but what would your mama say, or your grandmother, or whoever raised you, what would they say, man, if they seen you sitting on a seat like that with, you know, you sitting on top of the back of the seat and your foot in there, man? What would you say, man? I'm sure she was mad. So then his friend said, oh, man, my mom tore me up this time. So I said, I mean, you know, come on, champ, you know, come on. I mean, I know. So he said, yeah, you right, OG. So, you know, he gets down and he's sitting to the seat. Right. So now when I'm getting off a couple of stops, when I leave them, they're now talking about their parents, their grandmothers, and what they would have got whoopings for, and they're reminiscing about this, that, and the other. So they're left now thinking and talking about something a lot differently than what they was talking about before. And, you know, he got down off the seat. He's sitting in there, right. without feeling challenged.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, without his masculinity or anything
Exactly.
feeling challenged.
Right.
But you speak to him in their language, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes. Because I told him, I said, no, on some G stuff, man, for real.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not trying to, you know, I ain't trying to.
Yeah.
Because I was that little guy. I was him.
At some
Yeah.
point,
You know?
Yeah.
I was him.
Yeah, it's funny. I have 2 teenage daughters, and you know, knock wood, you know, pretty good, but they are teenage girls.
Yeah.
So there's certain, you know, world that comes with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I often say to them when they complain about me, whatever, I'm doing my mother thing. I often say to them, you know, and this is the line that they will use. You don't trust me. You don't trust me.
Yeah.
And I say, well, I trust you to make the best decisions that a 15-year-old girl can make.
15-year-old girl. Yeah.
Having been a 15-year-old girl many years ago, I'm aware that sometimes they're not, you know, 100% the best.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah. But I like that you make that connection in a way that is not threatening to them, because I think what a lot of people, I think where people get alienated, that generation gap where that alienation happens from, is that people are not coming to with respect for each
Right.
other. And I think it's natural for children not to respect adults, because that's part of their growing process, and they have to be reminded in a way that you reminded them.
Right.
But adults should remember.
Yeah.
I mean, those sometimes are fearful, you know, of them. And then
Yeah.
remember too that the kids that we're talking about, most of them were born from children.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they
Having
didn't
children.
Yeah.
they didn't have the values.
Right.
They didn't come up with the values. And then we're talking about
Yeah.
with drugs and,
Right.
and everything else.
Single
you know,
parents
some of these kids,
sometimes,
some of these kids raise themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they get
Yeah.
to a certain point, and they've seen a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
seen a lot.
Yeah.
And
Too
they
much
get to
for
the
their
point
age.
for their
Right.
age, exactly. They've experienced what a normal
Right.
child shouldn't have to experience. And so they get to the point to where as though now, here's this little boy that was maybe 10, had to look out and be the man for his little 6-year-old sister
Right.
or little brother,
Yeah.
because maybe mom was on drugs or she
Right.
was working,
Right.
you know, trying to, because pops
together,
wasn't
yeah.
there, he might have
Yeah.
been in jail or whatever the
Keep the
case may
family
be.
together.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so he had to be the man. So now he becomes 14, and he's actually, well, I'm the man. What are you going to tell me? You weren't
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
If
Right.
anything, some of you cats were the ones that was using me to do other
Right.
things.
Yeah. Right.
You know, so you can't
Yeah.
tell them anything.
Right.
So when you understand that and some of the things that they've been through and where they're coming from, and
Yeah.
you're not trying to challenge them in any way, I'm just going to give you another choice. I'm going to paint a picture that you might not have seen.
Right.
So here's another option for you. You
Yeah.
make the choice. It's
Yeah.
your choice. But this is what's behind door number 1, this is what's behind door number 2, and this is what's behind door number 3. You know? And so you make the choice of what, but now let me tell you something. You're going to have to live with the consequence of your choice.
Right.
So don't get to moaning and complaining and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
You know, you also, since you have to been the man, I'm going to speak
Yeah.
to you like a man.
Right.
You don't speak to them like children, and you don't.
And that's
threaten
the
them.
real challenge is
Yeah.
talking
Right.
to the youth. So that's
Yeah.
the beauty of what
Right.
Nate will bring to our youth program
Yeah,
as we move out into
Absolutely.
community.
So,
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about that. So, what do you tell me the structure of how that's going to work, and what do you see as the goals and objectives, and what are some of the resources that will make this a success?
Well, the program is mainly to approach females and males aged 13 to 17 who are, let's call them at risk.
Right.
At risk is a very broad term. At risk goes from people who are still in a two-parent family, going to school, to those who are on probation, and but they're at risk. The family ones are at risk because of the neighborhoods or gang interventions,
Right.
etc.
Or dysfunction within
or
the
dysfunction within their
Influence,
families,
right.
whatever that is. So our program is meant to
Peer
meet twice a week in the evenings. The themes will be surfaced among the youth about what is important to them. So this is the nickname for our program is YEA, Y-E-A, Youth Empowerment Through the Arts.
Right.
Meaning giving the youth a chance to say what they want to say about what's bothering them. Is it bullying in school? Is it teenage pregnancies? Is it not having enough time or not enough money or whatever? And then using those issues, those themes, to create scenes and then a play, and then for them to put that on for their own community. And through that, collaboratively
Right.
work together, team-wise,
Right.
and then have a
Exposing them
product.
to that process.
Yeah.
The process.
That's so much, that transforming process.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, can you think of what it is for a young man or woman who may have never been told that they were good at anything,
Right.
that they did
Yeah.
anything well?
Right, right,
Imagine them now starting something
right.
and seeing it through, and then getting accolades
Mm.
for it, and being, asked questions about the process that they went through, and being exposed to community and responsibility, giving them some type of responsibility. I don't care if it's just making sure that on the nights that we meet, here's the resources. You have to make sure that we all have pizza and soda.
Right.
That's your responsibility.
Right.
They've never been responsible for anything they like. Give them that responsibility, and it's like, wow, okay. Or the young man or woman who was the bully.
Right.
Yeah.
Used to being the bully. For 3 years, they were bullying people. Now, you cast them in the role of the bullied.
Yeah.
And here's the empathy. Now they can see what that person is going through.
Right.
How did you go now from putting yourself in that person's shoes, seeing that, being that character, and then going back to the bully? We say you don't. You can't. You can't be exposed to that level of empathy
Right.
and then go backwards.
Yeah.
We say you don't, and that's what the arts is going to bring. That's
Right.
what this process is
So
going to
you're
bring.
planting different seeds.
It's going to
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
going to give them a voice.
Yeah.
It's going to allow them to go within inside themselves, to see things, to see others. It's going to allow them to be exposed to community, responsibility, cooperation. It's going to allow them to use nonviolent resolutions to solve problems. It's going to allow them to trust and allow them to see other cultures and other people. It's going to allow them to, like Catherine says, to have life skills,
Right.
coping skills.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to expose them to, and then it's going to be so beautiful for them, because they're going to have people now who actually come out who wants to hear what you have
Right.
to say.
Right.
For the
Right.
first time maybe in your
Right.
life.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's the plan,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're fortunate this project has been funded by a Westchester-based family foundation,
Excellent.
and so who believes in the concept and in actually Mr. Cornell Alston over here to be the lead, and so we're just in the process of getting it launched this fall.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific. How many people is it intended to serve? Do you have a
20,
scope?
roughly start
Yeah.
with a group of 20.
Yeah.
Approximately 20. There'll
Yeah.
be 2
Yeah.
facilitators. One will be an art facilitator who's worked inside the walls, a woman who's trained as an educator and has a special interest in working with youth, and Nate, who will be working with her as a team.
Right.
That's the plan.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Now, just like on the inside, here's a group of teens, and this is how it serves the community too, because when you serve and you educate the youth, you serve and you educate the community. So these are 20 more kids who's not out in the streets.
Right. Right.
These are 20 more kids who's doing things that they would normally they would probably like doing, that because a lot of the arts has been taken out of the schools, etc.
Right.
So they're doing some things that they want to do,
Right.
and that means that there are less people that would be potential victims.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And the families that will
And the
families,
families
that
who
will gain in
Nice.
this and be part of it too.
Right.
Right. See them in a
So-
different
And
light.
as you say, they're authority figures in their lives too, so they'll be
Right.
positive.
Exactly.
They'll be positive
And this
influence.
is youth teaching youth. They'll be
Yep.
teaching each other and
They'll be
speaking to
modeling.
each
They'll
other.
be modeling what
Yeah.
behavior could be.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and once this is a success, once this pilot program is a success, we plan on launching RTA in every community in the United States. But
Big
we plan
dreams.
on- We plan on
We're gonna. It's going to
sky's
expand.
is the limit.
Yes,
That's the
absolutely,
plan,
absolutely. And of course, if you have a good model, that can be replicated.
Yeah, so we're
elsewhere,
already
yeah.
building, impact assessment tools into the beginning and the end of the program.
What we do need, and I must say this, is cooperation from various communities, various organizations, from government,
Right.
from everybody, because it takes a village to raise a child.
Absolutely.
So don't go past this opportunity
Yeah.
and or the resource that's available.
Right.
But formerly incarcerated people
Yeah.
coming out and wanting to
giving-
do this work,
giving them
you
a
should
chance.
you
Yeah.
should give them a chance. You should encourage them,
Right.
to do this work.
Right. Right.
And in any way that possibly can. And
Yeah.
I only say that because I'm having a little difficulty
Yeah.
at this point in time.
No,
No,
yeah,
I think-
I understand that completely. I understand that completely, and a lot of times, new ideas, you know, you have to pave the way a little bit and get over people's preconceived notions.
Yes, which is part
Yeah.
of what we're doing too.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. So I'm really
Thank you.
delighted to be able to help publicize this, and I'll be happy to
Thank
make
you.
sure that we that this conversation gets out into the not a huge wide world,
But
but
it'll
into
get
the
into the community.
into the
That's
into
great.
the Ossining, Croton, Cortland, and Peekskill
That's
communities.
And with DVDs, that
Yes.
can be, we can take it beyond that.
Absolutely,
Yes.
and it'll be on our website and my
Great.
personal website as well.
Terrific.
So yeah, thank you very much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
This was a really, really interesting conversation. Thank you for
Thank you.
thank you
for
for
having us.
for being so willing to share all the things that
Thank you,
that you
Catherine.
have
Yeah.
successfully done with the greater world. So
That's
Well, like I said, I have to give back. I have a lot to give back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm pretty capable.
Yeah.
So if there's any need, if there's anything that I
Great.
can do in any community, to help,
Talk
just
to the youth.
talk
Yeah.
to the youth or whatever, just reach
Absolutely.
out to me, and I'm there. I'm Johnny on the
yeah,
spot.
again, that's a dangerous offer.
No, but
up for it.
I think you
Excellent.
would welcome it.
No,
Great.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
Good.
so,
Yes.
Again, we're only connecting, right?
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Excellent.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Catherine.
you so
This is
much.
great.
This is
This is
really,
great.
really interesting and informative and show,
We
I think.
appreciate
Yeah,
your
yeah.
invitation to be on
Thank
the show.
you. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for being with us for this episode of Hudson Valley News and Views, and we'll see you next time.